You all can make up stories, but you and I know who I am.
Hollywood has a rule now because of what happened in 1987. They call it the Springsteen policy. And somehow, George Clooney found a way around it. His Walk of Fame star was approved before the rules changed. The plaque is ready. The money is paid. But decade after decade, the ceremony never happens. Meanwhile, he moved his whole family to France and started saying things about fame that most actors would never admit. What exactly did George Clooney say about Hollywood's biggest tradition? And why is one of the world's most famous actors running away from the spotlight? George Timothy Clooney came into the world on May 6, 1961, in Lexington, Kentucky. And even in those early years, the spotlight sat close to him. His father, Nick Clooney, worked as a television host, and his mother, Nina Bruce Warren, had already made her mark as first runner-up in the Miss Kentucky pageant. Nick first noticed her when he was judging a beauty competition she was in, and 2 years after that moment, they married in August 1959. By the time George arrived, the family wasn't rich, but lived inside a world shaped by cameras, scripts, and studio lights. When Nick returned to Cincinnati to host The Nick Clooney Show in 1969, young George spent long afternoons on the newsroom floor at WKRC, watching his father pull together entire broadcasts piece by piece. Those lights didn't intimidate him. They felt as normal as breakfast at home. And when the family settled in the little town of Augusta, with barely 100 people, George's life already looked different from the other kids, because he had grown up inside studios instead of playgrounds. And the talent ran deeper than his parents. His aunt Rosemary Clooney was one of the biggest music stars of the 1950s, with hits like Come On to My House and Hey There. And she even starred with Bing Crosby in White Christmas in 1954. George adored her, and at just 5 years old, in 1966, he made his first TV appearance on The Nick Clooney Show, not as a shy child hiding behind his father, but as a little performer doing sketch characters for the audience. That taste of entertainment stayed with him. Years later, when he moved to Los Angeles to try acting, he slept at Rosemary's house, drove her around the city, carried her bags, and helped her at shows. She taught him something painful but important. She knew what it felt like to be a megastar, and then suddenly watch fame disappear when the world moved on. Her life told him that stardom rests on shaky ground, and that reality shaped the way he understood success. When he turned 14 in 1975, his confidence was tested in the harshest way. He developed Bell's palsy, which froze half his face for almost a full year. One side wouldn't move. His smile pulled unevenly, and his eyelid wouldn't close, no matter how hard he tried. High school hallways became a battlefield, and the teasing was constant. Instead of breaking under the pressure, he started doing something unexpected. He joked about himself before anyone else could. Humor became a shield. Day after day, he learned how to deflect cruelty with timing and quick wit. That year carved something into him, giving him thick skin and a self-deprecating charm that later felt effortless on camera. Through all of this, he dreamed of baseball more than acting. He saw himself as a real athlete, playing basketball and baseball through high school with full belief that he could go pro. He even earned 2 tryouts with the Cincinnati Reds. At one event years later in September 2025, Reds owner Bob Castellini read George's real scouting report in front of thousands. George called it the most humiliating moment of his life because the report bluntly said he had no arm and no speed. Those were the tools he needed, and he didn't have them. He joked later that he looked amazing in the uniform, but the skill simply wasn't there. That rejection cut deep, and for a moment, it crushed him. But it also introduced him to the idea that wanting something isn't always enough. It taught him how to fail without quitting. After baseball slipped away, and after dropping out of Northern Kentucky University, where he studied broadcast journalism. Between 1979 and 1981, he drifted through difficult jobs. He sold shoes, then insurance door-to-door for almost nothing, and he cut tobacco under the scorching Kentucky sun for only $3.32 an hour, a job he had been doing since he was 13. He worked night shifts at a liquor store, and his father Nick sometimes sat with him after finishing his own TV anchor work just to make sure he was safe. By June 1982, he was walking horses at River Downs, a worn-out racetrack near Cincinnati, when his cousin, Miguel Ferrer, called with news that changed everything. Miguel said that his father, Jose Ferrer, needed extras for a racing film called And They're Off in Woodford County. George took the part, felt the rush of a real movie set, and heard Miguel tell him that he needed to come to California and act for real. George listened. He grabbed his rusted Monte Carlo and drove west with the hope that something better would be waiting. In 1982, at just 21, he rolled into Los Angeles with about $300 in his pocket. He stayed in Rosemary's Hollywood home, but this wasn't a glamorous new start. He slept on the floor of a closet for a full year while chasing tiny roles. To earn his place there, he drove Rosemary and her friends on their 4-Girls-4 tour, hauling them around the city, dealing with their loud demands, and learning more about show business from the back seat of a car than he ever learned in a classroom. Even with those connections, he couldn't find steady work. His days were filled with auditions that went nowhere, and nights spent hoping something would break. The struggle dragged on. Before ER changed his life in 1994, he went through 13 failed television pilots and 7 series that fizzled out before anyone cared. He showed up on The Facts of Life, The Golden Girls, and Rosie Ann, played detectives, supervisors, handymen, anything he could get. Nothing stuck. At one Family Ties audition, he brought a dog just to stand out, even though there was no dog in the script. At a Dracula audition in the early 1990s, he arrived drunk because the character was supposed to be a drunk. He tried every trick he could think of, but casting directors still labeled him as a guy meant only for forgettable TV roles. He watched project after project go to someone else. Even after he landed ER, he admitted that his own delusion blocked him because he saw himself as a film actor doing television, when the truth was that he was simply a TV actor still trying to climb out of the same hole. At one point, he was so desperate for roles that he took a tiny part in the 1993 film The Harvest as a lip-syncing transvestite. The film barely made a sound in Hollywood, but George needed the credit and the paycheck. He kept stacking these small pieces even though none of them made him visible enough to shift his career. This long period became a mix of humiliation and stubbornness. He said many times that he heard the word no more than he ever heard yes. Rosemary's reminder that fame comes and goes helped him survive these years without losing himself. Every rejection added another scar, but also another layer of strength. Eventually, he learned not to beg directors to like him. He learned to walk into auditions without pretending someone else's approval controlled his life. Those lessons shaped the man he was becoming. Then, 1994 arrived. ER premiered on September 19th and instantly pulled in 23.8 million viewers. Within 3 nights, nearly 40% of television watchers were tuned in. Clooney's character, Dr. Doug Ross, exploded in popularity. By 1997, just 3 years later, People magazine named him Sexiest Man Alive. The sudden shift from constant rejection to instant stardom shocked him. The man who slept in closets, sold shoes, cut tobacco, and survived on hope became the face of Thursday nights. Dr. Ross was a wild mix of charm and trouble. He broke rules, took risks, chased women, and fought with hospital administrators while battling his own flaws. Audiences connected with his raw edges and vulnerability. His medical lines were so complicated, he wrote them on clipboards during scenes, because he couldn't memorize the terminology. Yet viewers thought the authenticity made him more real. ER stayed in the top 4 for 8 straight seasons, and Clooney became a cultural force. Even then, he didn't rest. While still filming ER's grueling seasons, he dove into film work. In 1996, he shot From Dusk Till Dawn and One Fine Day during his short hiatus, pushing himself non-stop. In 1997, he stepped into the Batman suit for Batman and Robin, a film that later embarrassed him and taught him how dangerous a wrong project can be. Still, he pushed forward, taking more risks, knowing that his moment could disappear at any second. And then came the decision almost no one expected. On February 18, 1999, after 5 seasons, he walked away from ER. The offer to stay was enormous. Television stars didn't leave hits like that, but he knew if he stayed too long, people would only see him as Dr. Ross and nothing more. He wanted film work, and leaving the show meant risking everything he had just earned. It was a terrifying choice. If the film career didn't take off fast enough, he would be too old to circle back. But he understood the timing. He understood he had to step into the unknown before Hollywood locked him in place. George Clooney walked into 1997 thinking he had found the role that would finally lift him into the top tier of movie stars. He signed on to play Batman and earned $1 million for the job, a number that felt huge at the time and carried the promise of a future filled with more blockbusters. But as the cameras rolled and the months passed, the feeling started to shift. The suit felt stiff, the script felt weaker every day, and he felt himself sinking into a project he couldn't save. When Batman and Robin came out on June 20th, 1997, everything collapsed at once. The film had a massive production budget between $125 and $160 million. Yet the box office barely pushed it to $107.3 million domestically and $238.2 million worldwide, which meant that after marketing, the movie almost broke even, but not in a way anyone felt proud of. Critics crushed it with a harsh 12% score, and Roger Ebert joined the voices tearing it apart. Fans mocked the Batsuit with its strange chest details, they laughed at Arnold Schwarzenegger's ice puns, and they treated the whole thing like a spectacle gone wrong. Clooney later said he felt miserable inside the suit, trying to make scenes work, even while he knew the script was falling apart. The failure hit so hard that Warner Bros. Froze the Batman franchise for 8 long years, long enough to miss the first wave of the new superhero era built by X-Men and Spider-Man. Clooney didn't hide from any of this. Instead, he leaned toward the mess and made it part of his identity. He stepped into interviews with an open grin and said he understood why people thought he ruined Batman. He even repeated the jokes himself. When he directed Ben Affleck in The Tender Bar in 2021, he teased that it took them 9 years to work together because Affleck had ruined the Batman franchise that Clooney had made so solid. The joke flipped the truth in a way that made people laugh, but also showed how comfortable he was with the past. He even told his wife Amal she could watch almost any of his films, except that one, because he wanted her to keep some dignity for him. When his young son learned that he had played Batman and replied not really, Clooney laughed and said the boy had no idea how right he was. Opening himself up like this turned a painful failure into something warm and even charming, and the public started seeing him as a man who could take a hit and keep smiling. The failure pushed him into a turning point that reshaped everything he did next. 1 year after Batman and Robin, he chose Steven Soderbergh's Out of Sight, even though it looked risky. The movie earned only $37.5 million domestically and $77.7 million worldwide. Yet critics loved it. It carried an 84 Metascore and showed a different Clooney, one who had real charisma and presence, especially next to Jennifer Lopez. That momentum led him straight into David O. Russell's Three Kings in 1999, a sharp Gulf War heist story that pulled in $108 million and proved he could handle serious political material. Clooney said later that he had reached a point where he understood that if he was going to fail again, he wanted it to happen because of his own taste, not because he chased something empty. So he leaned into projects like Out of Sight, Three Kings, and Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, and trusted his instincts more than the market. Working with the Coen brothers in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou in 2000 finished the transformation. The movie cost only $26 million and opened quietly in just 5 theaters on December 25th. Slowly, through word of mouth and steady praise, it grew into 847 theaters and earned $45.5 million domestically and $75.7 million worldwide. Clooney played Ulysses Everett McGill, a smooth-talking escapee obsessed with hair pomade, and the role won him a Golden Globe. People started seeing him as someone who could mix humor, depth, and oddball charm in a way that felt fresh. The soundtrack took on a life of its own, went 8 times platinum with 8 million copies sold, and even launched a tour. The success proved Clooney could shine in material far outside the expected leading man path. Looking back, he often said that bombing so publicly freed him. Once the worst had happened, fear lost its power over him. He said the lesson of Batman and Robin was one of the best he ever learned, because it pushed him to take ownership of his choices. He started picking scripts based on what he cared about, even if nobody around him encouraged those risks. And when he stopped chasing the giant commercial hits, something strange happened. The better scripts found him, bigger roles opened up, and soon he stepped into the Ocean's 11 world. When Ocean's 11 opened on December 7, 2001, it knocked Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone out of the top spot and earned $38.1 million in its opening weekend. With an $85 million budget, the movie eventually earned $450.7 million worldwide and gave Clooney a career rebirth. The cast was stacked with Brad Pitt, Matt Damon, Julia Roberts, Andy Garcia, Don Cheadle, Bernie Mac, and Carl Reiner. And the chemistry between them became the heartbeat of the film. Stylish direction, a fast pace, and the glossy Las Vegas setting created a new template that Hollywood spent years trying to copy. The success continued, and soon the Ocean's trilogy became a money machine. Ocean's 12 came out in 2004 with a $110 million budget and made $362.7 million worldwide. Ocean's 13 hit theaters in June 2007 and earned $301.7 million globally. Combined, the trilogy crossed $1.1 billion in worldwide revenue. That number gave Clooney real leverage in Hollywood. He could now make personal films like Good Night and Good Luck without sacrificing his commercial standing. The heist movies also showed something else. Audiences loved watching actors who genuinely enjoyed working with each other, and Clooney became known as the leader who made sets feel fun. George Clooney was only 28 when he rushed into that Las Vegas wedding with Talia Balsam in December 1989. It felt impulsive and bright, almost like he was chasing a feeling before it slipped away. The marriage lasted 4 years, ending when he filed for divorce in 1992. And by 1993, the split was final. The failure stayed with him in a way he couldn't hide. By 1995, sitting across from Barbara Walters, he admitted he wasn't very good at marriage and said he would never marry again. The words followed him for decades. Interview after interview, he kept repeating that he carried the blame. In Vanity Fair, he said he definitely wasn't someone who should have been married back then and didn't give Talia a fair chance. That line shaped the picture people had of him, turning him into the man who would rather avoid the aisle than risk another heartbreak. Once he stepped away from that marriage, his life slid into a rhythm that fed his playboy image. He dated younger women who didn't share his spotlight and seemed fine with that distance. His most talked about relationship before Amal was with Stacy Keibler, who was 19 years younger than him. They dated from 2011 to 2013, showing up at premieres and festivals, even walking the Toronto red carpet together for The Descendants. Eventually, they sat down and talked about the future. She wanted marriage and children. He still held on to his never-again promise. People magazine later said they realized they wanted completely different things. Even comedians teased him for his pattern of choosing lovely young partners and keeping things temporary. Then something shifted. Just months after his breakup with Keebler in July 2013, he met the one person who would turn his whole story upside down. That night began quietly. In July 2013, a mutual friend asked if they could bring someone to dinner at George's Lake Como villa. That someone turned out to be Amal Alamuddin, a 36-year-old human rights lawyer heading to Cannes. They started emailing, letting curiosity build. By October 2013, they had their first date in London. It grew naturally from there, flowing from message to meeting, until one evening changed everything. On April 28, 2014, George made pasta and set the room with Rosemary Clooney's songs. He hid the ring in a drawer and asked Amal to grab the candle lighter. When she opened the drawer and found the ring, he dropped to one knee. She was so shocked she left him waiting for almost 20 minutes while he knelt there sweating and wondering if he had made a mistake. When she finally said yes, everything moved fast. On September 27, 2014, they married in Venice in a 3-day celebration that cost $4.6 million and included 100 cases of Casamigos tequila, 250 bottles of champagne, and guests like Matt Damon, Bono, and Anna Wintour. It was loud, bright, joyful, and it proved that the world's most stubborn bachelor could change his mind. 3 years later, on June 6, 2017, at St. Mary's Hospital in London, George became a father for the first time at 56. Amal gave birth to twins, Alexander and Ella, 1 month early. Alexander weighed 5.5 pounds, and Ella weighed 4.5. They arrived 1 minute and 49 seconds apart. George's publicist joked that George was sedated and should recover in a few days. George later told The Hollywood Reporter that nothing felt real until the babies were in the room. He said it hits you all at once, and suddenly you go from imagining parenthood to thinking, holy shit, I'm a parent. By 60, he laughed about the sheer running around that came with it. His friends had grown kids, and here he was chasing toddlers. He said he could still do the rope swing at 60, but wasn't sure about 80. After the twins were born, he shifted his whole career so he could spend more time at home near the lake with them. But being married to Amal meant stepping into a world filled with political storms and moral debates. Amal's work as a human rights lawyer pulled her into some of the most controversial cases of the decade. She began as a white-collar defense lawyer at Sullivan and Cromwell in New York, representing former Enron executives tied to a scandal that ruined thousands of lives and retirements. Later, she represented Julian Assange during his extradition fight, and Abdullah al-Senussi, Gaddafi's intelligence chief accused of war crimes. In 2014, she even declined a UN role investigating Gaza war crimes because she was already juggling 8 active cases. Her work defending clients accused of terrorism, genocide denial, and political crimes sparked a lot of anger online. Critics questioned her choices and attacked her for defending certain people. George suddenly found his Hollywood persona tied to global legal battles involving ISIS, Libya, Egypt, and the Middle East. It was a huge shift from his Ocean's 11 days, and it changed how people viewed both of them. Then came the shock that shook Hollywood. When Virginia Giuffre's memoir, Nobody's Girl, was released on October 21, 2025, it carried a disturbing claim. Giuffre wrote that Ghislaine Maxwell had bragged about performing a sexual act on George Clooney in a bathroom at a party years earlier. She said Maxwell returned from the event excited and giddy, claiming she never let that memory go. Giuffre admitted she didn't know if it was true and said, "We'll never know." Importantly, George faced no accusations of wrongdoing of any kind. Still, the claim stirred up headlines. Maxwell had made similar claims before, leaked in 2020 through earlier memoir excerpts. None of it was proven. But once Giuffre's 2025 book came out, the story exploded. George was furious. People close to him said he was boiling with anger when he heard the allegation in late October 2025. They insisted he had never met Ghislaine Maxwell and called the claim a grotesque lie. George himself stayed quiet publicly, but friends said he was enraged. The story reportedly caused friction at home, too. Amal, now 47, was said to be humiliated and furious. It came at a time when people were already whispering that their marriage was strained. Hollywood insiders said the claim shocked everyone and added new pressure to an already fragile moment. Another story added fuel. On June 8, 2025, at the Tony Awards, George had his own chaotic night. He had just finished a 6-month Broadway run in Good Night and Good Luck, and attended the show at Radio City Music Hall with Amal. When he lost the Best Leading Actor award to Cole Escola, he partied hard afterward. In an October 2025 Esquire interview, he admitted he got blasted and barely walking drunk. He said he hadn't really drunk during his Broadway run, so the after-party hit him like a truck. He called it high school drunk, dumbass drunk, and said he was sick the whole next day. He and Amal laughed about it in bed, joking that he had caught up on 6 months of abstinence in one night. Tabloids, of course, claimed Amal was worried. It became another talking point for people predicting divorce. The political tension didn't help either. Amal was reportedly fed up with George's public political stumbles through 2024 and 2025. When he endorsed Kamala Harris during her campaign, insiders said it only made him look self-important. His New York Times op-ed calling for President Biden to step aside in July 2024 also drew eye rolls. Meanwhile, his Broadway work kept him in New York for 6 months, while Amal and the twins stayed in Europe. Sources said he was moody as his ego took hits, and Amal had to handle most of the childcare. It created distance that people around them noticed. Yet in public, George and Amal kept their image clean and calm. In January 2025, on CBS Mornings with Gayle King, George said they were having a great time in life. He joked that they still hadn't had an argument and were trying to find something to fight about. In August 2025, they appeared together with their twins at Lake Como. Amal wore a white dress and a straw hat, looking peaceful. In her glamour interview in July 2025, she said they never put their children's faces in public and praised George as a supportive partner. Their strategy was clear: avoid feeding rumors, show unity, keep people guessing. Somewhere inside all this noise, George had an odd Hollywood mystery attached to his name. He had a star on the Walk of Fame waiting for him. It had been approved years ago, the $50,000 fee paid, the plaque engraved and sitting in a warehouse, but without George scheduling a ceremony, it couldn't be installed. The committee didn't treat it as a rejection. They said he was just too busy. Still, decades passed, and the sidewalk stayed empty. He wasn't the only one. Al Pacino and Denzel Washington also had pending stars stuck in limbo. That whole policy came from another Hollywood moment. In 1987, Bruce Springsteen didn't show up for his own Walk of Fame ceremony and caused so much embarrassment that officials created the Springsteen policy. From then on, celebrities had to promise they would attend before their star was approved. No attendance promise meant no star. George was approved before the rule tightened, which explains why his plaque sits waiting. By August 2021, George and Amal seemed to want something quieter. They bought Domaine du Canadel in Brignoles for $8.3 million, a massive 425-acre wine estate with a 25-acre vineyard, a lake, olive groves, a pool, tennis courts, and a guest house. After a legal dispute with another buyer faded away, the sale went through. On December 29, 2025, France published official documents granting citizenship to George, Amal, and the twins. They became French residents, shifting their lives far from Hollywood. The mayor welcomed them warmly and called them part of the community. For George, raising his kids in France wasn't just a lifestyle choice. It was a shield. In an October 2025 Esquire interview, he said he worried about raising kids in Los Angeles, where fame shaped everything. He didn't think his children would get a fair shot. France offered the opposite. He said people there don't care about fame and that his twins have dinner with adults, take their dishes in, and live life without screens or paparazzi. Born in June 2017, the twins have been kept almost completely out of public view. Even while stepping away from Hollywood's noise, George kept racking up honors. On April 27, 2026, he would receive the Chaplin Award at Lincoln Center, joining legends like Meryl Streep, Martin Scorsese, Sidney Poitier, and Gregory Peck. The award recognized his 2 Oscars, Golden Globes, SAG Awards, AFI Lifetime Achievement Award, and his humanitarian work. It was a reminder that even though he kept his distance from Hollywood sidewalks, the industry still celebrated him. Then came the media war. On December 29, 2025, George criticized CBS News in a Variety interview, saying Bari Weiss was dismantling the network. His anger spiked when CBS delayed a 60-minute segment that exposed alleged abuse of Venezuelan migrants in El Salvador's prison system. CBS had promoted the segment, scheduled it, and then pulled it. He saw it as political pressure and said he worried more about how people got information than anything about his movie career. President Trump responded 2 days later on December 31, 2025. He attacked George on Truth Social, celebrating his French citizenship but calling him one of the worst political prognosticators ever. He even said Clooney wasn't a movie star at all and called his career mediocre. He mocked France's crime and immigration record, too. The attack surprised people who remembered their once friendly interactions before Trump entered politics. George answered on January 1, 2026. He told The Hollywood Reporter that he agreed with the president and said we must make America great again and will begin in November, hinting at the midterm elections. It was a clever comeback that turned the insult into a political jab. He explained elsewhere that he moved his family to avoid paparazzi and protect his kids. He even said he had taken more than 400 days of French classes and praised France for not caring about fame. The French government said they granted citizenship because the Clooneys elevated France's international standing. As the years moved forward, George kept reflecting on the state of Hollywood. In December 2025 interviews, he said the era of true movie stars might be gone. He blamed studios for no longer building actors into household names and said the streaming era destroyed the system that once shaped icons. Matt Damon even explained that 8 out of 10 successful mid-budget films made their profits from DVD sales, not theaters. Those sales vanished. Theater attendance also dropped sharply. In the 1940s, half the country went to movies weekly. By 2025, it was around 10%. George said he wasn't trying to compete with younger actors anymore. He knew that chapter had passed. Still, he didn't slow down. He starred in J. Kelly, which premiered at the 2025 Venice Film Festival and later streamed on Netflix. He signed on within a day of reading the script because it offered a kind of vulnerability older actors rarely get to play. He also shared a story from the late 1990s about meeting Paul Newman at Warner Brothers. Newman didn't know who he was until enough people greeted George by name. Newman gave him advice about handling fame. George later said he copied Newman's performances several times, especially praising The Verdict as one of the greatest performances ever.